Hello, everyone. Hey, thank you very much for having me here. It was great to get across the border with ease. I thought I might be machine gunned down. I'm a Norfolk person, by the way. Just please don't hold it against me today. I'll make a few parallels. I'm hugely impressed by the previous talk and by Juliet's work, and I think you really have done some amazing work here in Suffolk. I find that completely inspiring. So my talks are Forgotten Ponds and Ghosts, Resurrection, Ecology and Conservation in Farmland, and I'm just one of many people who have been involved in this work. So I'm going to try and dispel a few myths about ponds. One is that in farmland ponds, fallen wood, it's a good thing to leave in the pond. I'll talk to you about that. Farmland ponds are polluted and poor for wildlife. I want to just massively dispel that myth. And then I may just have a little discussion with you privately about this over coffee, about a relationship between Norwich and Ipswich, but we can discuss that possibly later on. I always like to start talks on ponds by giving you a sort of cultural angle, because I think we're all here for a reason, and it's to do with our past, and that's why I'm here. And I think the culture about ponds is just as important as the species, really. I'm from a village called Bodham on the North Norfolk coast. And the reason I love ponds is because I was surrounded by ponds. In fact, I barely left my village as a child because I just found so much interest in and around my village. There were so many ponds there. So the black dots are ponds. I was just found to the north at the top there. And the blue dots are where my favourite species, the crucian carp, was found that I used to fish for. So I barely ever left the village throughout my entire childhood. When I actually went to London in the end, people were very surprised, actually. I finally left the county. This is me back in time. That's back in the when I was a little boy, and that's me now. So when I get back, I'm wearing a posh shirt today. I just want to be clear, picture of my dad. So just really, I'm from Norfolk, from farming stock, really. So I just want to get that across to you. And this is why I love ponds. Really, is I was lucky enough to hang around a place like this, and I fished for this species called the crucian carp. And I had no idea about it. I was basically using myself forever at that point, really. So what I'm going to talk about, all sorts of things about ponds, really, about restoration especially. A lot of the ponds we have in Norfolk are marl pits, and I'm sure you have some marl pits over here. And as you get towards South Norfolk, you get the clay lump ponds, which you have huge numbers here in Suffolk. There's many livestock watering ponds that have their origins as that, and I'm sure they were perhaps dug for something previously as well. It's probably quite complicated. We call them hospits in Norfolk, isn't that what you call them over here? Some of these ponds could be very old. We see them as sort of 200, 300 years old. Some of them in the middle of the fields could even go back to the Roman era. So they're incredibly important historic features that we've neglected in an archaeological sense as well. They're used to fertilise in the fields, as Juliet has said, aid in drainage. The crucian carp was fished for and eaten and used in these marl pits, and it was all over the place in the past. Hemp retting, and I could go on and on about all the uses of ponds in the past, which have all more or less gone. John Cotman, the Norwich artist, did a lovely picture of a marl pit being dug here in 1810. It must have been a dry year, or a West Norfolk where it's a bit dry, but you can see that's a marl pit being dug. So marling was one of the big reasons, and this is what Juliet was talking about. This amazing stuff and she put me onto this from Thomas Tusser, writing in 1557, such muddy deep ditches and the pits in the field, that all the dry summer no water will yield, by saying and casting that mud upon heaps, commodities many the husbandman reaps. So, in other words, dig out your ponds for the leaf litter on the fields. I mean, that's what people used to do. Incredibly used environments. Everyone hung around ponds. Probably loved ponds. Here we've got a picture of Norfolk. So there's a lot of ponds in Norfolk. I believe you have 22,000 ponds in Suffolk. We've got 23,000 ponds just up there. Huge numbers in the middle district there, and the headwaters of the rivers. It is the most neglected resource. That's what I want to get across. It's the most amazing neglected resource. 95% of those ponds, I would say, we can't estimate it, and I assume it's the same for Suffolk, but actually I think you might have done quite a lot of work to reverse that. are overgrown, like they're thickets. Most people don't even recognise them as ponds. They see them as little woodlands. They have no idea they're ponds. Some farmers didn't even know that these were ponds, actually. And I know that you find that amazing, but it's actually true. Some farmers, and certainly their children didn't know there was a pond there. So they're all overgrown like this. And then when you get into the pond, they're very, it's a tangle of fallen woods, of dead leaves, and they're very, very low in diversity, no matter what group you search for. So they're not especially brilliant. And inspiration for this talk, every single idea that I speak of, all comes from this man on the right called Richard Waddingham, who has an amazing farm in North Norfolk, which is very similar to what you've done at Grove Farm. There's one parallel there. And so all the ideas and enthusiasm I was infected by meeting him in 2006, really. He gave me lots of ideas. And he comes from Manor Farm in Bristol in North Norfolk. And it's a typical mixed farm with 40 ponds on it, so a good number of ponds, but not atypical. They're all managed ponds. There's a managed mosaic management approach, removal of sediment and scrub. They're not mature trees, it's recent scrubs coming since the Second World War, especially since the 1960s, 70s. They're managed on rotation. He manages 4 ponds a year, and so you've got this mosaic of ponds at different stages in the landscape. And you look at the species list there, and the more you go, the more you find, actually. But 22 different species of dragonfly, which is pretty good for a nature reserve, really. Many different aquatic plants, great crested newt is prolific, and we've got some other beloved creatures in there as well, even eels. Love eels, that's another story. Alan Moore will tell you about that. Here's the ponds here, and you can see it's quite a nice network there, and it's very, very close together, and it's a magical place. And all sorts of different stages of succession. So here's a pond that's very open, quite recently managed. There's no trees around this one. Here's another pond a little bit more mature, full of Cosmogeton natans, and always full of pond weeds and other things. Getting a much more richer emergent fringe around it, growing in a bit. A little bit more mature, perhaps starting to encroach a little bit. Perhaps a little bit more so now. And then what Richard does is he'll then come in, and rather than get really closed over, he'll then intervene and then take out some of the trees on one bank and do this management approach to keep the openness of the pond. He doesn't manage all his ponds, so some are overgrown, but 95% are managed like this. And just after management is an incredibly rich phase. And when we've compared Richard's ponds with neighbouring ponds in the landscape, overgrown ponds, you see this huge increase in diversity in Richard's ponds. They stand out there, they're massively different across all the biological groups. It's astonishingly different. So that was inspiring to us to try and understand what pond restoration does, and how it works, and why also the overgrown ponds are so harsh for species to survive in. So, with the Sayers Black Pit, it was incredibly embarrassing to me, after studying these ponds at Richard Waddingham's and stuff, that in the background there was this sort of secret thing lurking in the background, that the 2 ponds on my dad's farm were really overgrown. So before the press got hold of this, and we have the Eastern Daily Press, probably the same as your East Anglian Daily Times, so we ought to manage it, so that before there was some sort of big, pond shocker in the news. So here's Sayers Black Pit. Before restoration, we did 2 years of monitoring before restoration on 2 overgrown ponds, and then 1 control pond which we didn't manage. Okay, that was sort of moderately overgrown, and it's called. We imaginatively called that study the 3 Ponds study. Okay, so here we have the pond, and we had to bash our way into the centre to find a tiny bit of open waters in the middle of this thicket. That's the centre of Sayers Black Pit, which was a sort of mix of sort of very small algae and bacterial soup in the middle there. We sampled every month for 2 years, every single group we could think of, including the water chemistry and did profiles and things. It was the most fascinating thing I've ever done study-wise. When all times of the year we're bashing through the ice here one Christmas, and we actually had a little robin as company on the side of the boat there, sheltering from the storm on the outside. And you have to, if you're going to do a pond study, it's not just summer work. But remember, a lot of these species have got to get through quite a harsh winter, and believe me, conditions are very harsh underneath the ice. Here's the oxygen levels before restoration, and the red tells you it's very low oxygen, and and these are water level changes. So you can see there are certain times of year, in fact long periods of the year, where there's no oxygen in that pond whatsoever. It's very, very low in oxygen. And then we decided to restore it, and that's other stuff going on in the other ponds as well, but I'm just going to focus on Sayers Black Pit, okay? So here's Sayers Black Pit. We're starting the management, or what I would more call restoration, really. This is quite a big scale event. Taking out the trees. We then go with a digger, and we dug out about 2/3 of the pond. We hit it pretty hard, really. Dug out the mud, and that was then spread across the fields. So that's November 2011. By February 2012, it was looking, well, I was a bit sort of horrified. It was looking a bit green and a bit murky, and I thought, oh, what have we done? It's all Richard was wrong. But then, if you skip forward now, we're just 1 year on to September 2012, and as Juliet was saying, really, it's astonishing. You had no idea that we'd been there. It was extremely rich in species. I couldn't see where we'd be. All the plants came up with the digger bucket was going in. And you skip forward another year, and look at it. It's a proper, high-quality farmland pond from an absolute thicket. And you look at what happened to the oxygen. The oxygen came back into the pond after restoration. It was increased enormously. And you look at the species list, before and after. This is for macrophytes, dragonflies, and amphibians. And you can see there's 2 ticks there in the before, and believe me, they are generous ticks. We were searching for species. We were there a long, long time. We had common darter and emperor dragonfly, and that emperor dragonfly was really one that was, I think, pretty much flying over, really, but we were honest with it. It was going somewhere else. And then afterwards, you know, it's a burgeoning environment, and of course all those things are breeding. And note also, of course, all the amphibians, they all come back, and they're all breeding. They're all in the landscape, but they've got nowhere to go. So, lovely. Even for chironomids, we did work on the chironomids as well, because that's a group you might work, you know, how's that going to change? They also increased hugely after restoration. In fact, every single group that we've looked at increased after restoration. And we've found this to be repeated across many, many ponds now. So it looks like it's a superb technique, and I should show that's our control pond. So our control pond is never showing very much change. The other really fascinating thing is we talk about, sometimes farmland ponds are talked about being quite polluted, and certainly they're not like shockingly clean, not really, really clean environments for water, but they're not that bad at all actually, and certainly good enough for lots of species to persist. But after restoration, you can see that the nutrient levels, this is total phosphorus, come down hugely after restoration. So you measure the chemistry in an overgrown pond, but it doesn't tell you what the chemistry would be like when you've actually restored it. And it will come down, the phosphorus levels will come down quite a lot. So that's another interesting phenomenon. And we've done this many times. There's another pond back in 2013. We did restoration, and we've got a big hump in the middle here. See the hemp retting. So you've got doing different activities on both sides. Or the market cart went in, we don't know. But we never changed the contours of the pond. We always walked to the old contours. So we're not removing marl, we're removing fine sediment. There it is. And then 1 year after, it's burgeoning. And it's not just common species that are turning up, it's rare species as well. And they look spectacular, and the farmers love them. They start reconnecting. Here's the before and after list for this pond. As you can see, as time goes on, you start to accumulate big lists of aquatic plants and beetles there. This pond. Here's another one we did quite recently, and here it is afterwards. And again, the aquatic plants colonise very quickly. And this one was really nice. And I should say we find some quite rare things, but in this one it was really nice because we found the extremely rare macrophyte Nias marina, which is it's only its second time ever outside the Norfolk Broads. It turned up in one of our farmland ponds. And I think people will say, well, you put it there, Carl, but I honestly didn't put it there. Honestly. So there's two, I just want to differentiate between a ghost pond. So the things I've just talked about are overgrown existing ponds, okay? A ghost pond, and I usually get the lights dimmed at this point. A ghost pond is something quite different, okay? These are ghost ponds. All these red dots are previous ponds that were in the landscape. And you can see this particular area of Norfolk, which probably would have been one of the most densely packed landscape ponds in the UK. Had huge numbers of ponds in it at one stage, and they disappeared. But you can still see them in the landscape. So these are disappeared ponds, filled in, levelled over. You see them as dips, and you can't quite get rid of the dip where it was. And you often see wet bits. The water will lay there like a puddle in that agricultural field. You can see, especially in that top picture, that's a puddle. So the crop is rubbish actually in a wet year. It's not productive agricultural land sometimes. Or you can see them as dark patches or crop marks. You can see there's a pond to the right-hand side of that hedge there, and there's another one that's infilled on the left-hand side. So they've been levelled over, and you've got a crop. This is the work of Emily Alderton, our PhD students. So that is a pond before restoration. And luckily, you haven't got to do any before surveys there, have you? There were no great techniques in that, okay? I guarantee, you don't even need eDNA to prove that one, I reckon. You'd be hard, there it is. That's the pond before restoration. We dug a trench, and doing this like archaeological sense is really the best way to do it, we decided, because you can find where the pond was. And you can see this dark layer under the field. That is where the old pond was. You can even look at the history of the pond from the cores. So we found the dark layer, and then we dug to that layer, but we didn't dig it all out, okay? We didn't dig all the dark layer out, it's really important. So we look at making a mess in the field, basically, here, and then we finished making the mess in the field. And we more or less followed the we did a little flourish of a little shallow bit there. I kind of wish we hadn't now, but we did. But it still looks lovely anyway. And we left the dark bit as the old pond sediment. So we skipped through time. That was in September. We're now into the winter, and we've got a buffer left around the pond as well. How we persuaded these farmers to do these ghost ponds, I have no idea, but we did. In the middle of the field, we start to fill up, and then we skip forward. We're now 1 year on, and it's full of plants, full of aquatic plants, and you've got ranunculus flowering in the pond on the right side. It's the only place that was flowering anywhere in East Anglia, I would say. The plant had no idea what time of year it was. It come up, no idea, basically. And anyway, it's starting to look really nice. We move forward again another year, and so it's not like the most beautiful pond ever, but it's a pond that is there now. And over time it will start to look really nice. But wildflowers are starting to come in. There's no planting here, okay? Where do these plants come from? Well, when you take these dark layers out of the fields, or underneath all these old overgrown ponds, you find these layers full of fossils. I'm a massive fan of fossils, but they're not fossils. Many of the things that live in this pond are alive. So you can see the leaves of the pondweed there. That's a pondweed. They're basically leaves that are pressed into this sediment. But amongst those leaves are seeds. And when you take those seeds to the greenhouse and you grow them, you realise that actually they're viable, and they're viable for centuries, even underneath the field. So they are truly ghost ponds, aren't they? Because they're not dead at all, they're still with us, they're just waiting to come back. I've still got to get all the terminology right for this, but I need the lighting and everything correct for that, just to speak you out. But anyway, a lot of these things are coming back: pondweeds, charophytes, ranunculus, sparganium, all coming back from the dead. And the key thing is, wherever you put the bucket in these ponds, when you're in the restored ponds, is where the plants come back. So you're restoring a pond, you're restoring the species of old, basically. They're coming back from old stock. Just finally, sorry, that was quite good, wasn't it? Just finally, one good reason for restoring ponds, we're looking for an iconic species of a great new. One of the really good things to look at is the birds. These ponds we're discovering are hugely important, not just for water birds, but for farmland birds. And this is a particular place where we saw huge numbers of swift swallows and house martins come in one afternoon, feeding off insects, a chimney of insects coming off this pond. And when we actually look at this, we're discovering that the managed farmland ponds, these open ponds, are hugely important for farmland birds and have a much higher number of farmland bird visits and a much higher diversity of species than all the overgrown ponds. So by managing ponds, we're also helping farmland birds, and I'll put money on it, and also helping things like bats as well. So farmland ponds are amazing. Maybe the single best farmland habitat, but maybe also the most underrated and ignored, and they are still being filled in the wider landscape. I've been to a lot of ponds which are being filled in. Locals love their ponds. Many people remember fishing in them, remember mucking about in them, and they are sad to see this happen, to see this overgrowth of the ponds. So the Norfolk Ponds project, which we started a couple of years ago, and really we were inspired by what you've done in Suffolk, really, is trying to sort of redress that. And as Juliet says, we're getting no help really from countryside stewardship on this. I find utterly remarkable, really, that there's nothing really that should be totally embraced by it, but isn't. But we will continue regardless. So there's some leaflets on the project at the back, and please do grab one. What am I going to say to conclude? Ponds can be superb even in high intensity farmland. Okay, you can grow crops and have really high, brilliant ways for conservation. The mosaic approach of pond management is the best way to do the conservation. Currently farmland ponds are declining, and we're not really doing enough to stop that happening. The restoration approach that we've been talking about, that Juliet was talking about as well, works extremely well. It seems to work every time. And there are huge conservation and cultural benefits from loving our farmland ponds again. So, with all the uses they had in the past for ponds, we need a new use, really. And that new use, I think, needs to be conservation. We use them for watering cattle, fishing, firewood, watering, farm machinery, all sorts of reasons. All those reasons have gone. Now it has to be conservation. So thank you ever so much to all the Norfolk Pond Project partners, and especially to all the landowners and countrymen that have helped us with our work. And we've got some information, but it's all the modern age now, all these things. You can find out more about the project from all these things. Please do as well, because the more support we can get, the better. And that's the next talk. Thank you very much.